Now, I think this is setting you up for something you sent me, but who was the favorite comedian that you booked on the show? And maybe I'm throwing this out to you. His last name is a food item.
Yeah. So again, the show is struggling. We're trying to get attention and at least book spots. I mean, that was my job and it was so hard in the beginning. Now, obviously it's not, but my boss said, I want you to book something so unique, so crazy that I'm going to think you're crazy and that I could even fire you, that this is such a bad idea. And, I want you to take it. So I was like, got it. So my brother, Mike, found this CD because this rock label, independent rock label, put out Neil Hamburger's comedy CDs because he used to open up for rock bands. But his whole act is that he's really terrible and offensive and awful. I pitch him and I think my boss is like, I don't get it, or I get it. Let's see. He shows it to Jimmy and Jimmy's like, this is great. So we all assume he's going to bomb. And it's hard to, real stand-ups aren't doing well. Oh, and the other guest that night was Yoko Ono, which was an awesome get. So before he starts, I just whispered to Yoko Ono, this guy's a really good performance artist. So she just lit up. That's like her world.
Yeah.
He goes out there and half the audience hates him, half the audience gets it. Our audience loved him like he was a real comic. So when we were cutting to people in the audience, they were laughing for real. He was so great. He did such a great job. And then the comics did well. I don't know why. I just needed to break that kind of curse or something.
Yes, that is the voice of Adam Spiegelman, and you've tuned into another episode of Comedy History 101, where we school you in comedy. Adam, our guest today, was the comedy booker for Jimmy Kimmel Live, and he was there right from the beginning. And he's going to do a deep dive into the ins and outs of producing comedy and comedians for, yes, Jimmy Kimmel Live. But before we jump into the episode, hey, if you like Comedy History 101 or simply tolerate us, take some time to like, subscribe, and comment on Comedy History 101, wherever you get your podcasts. Every little star and comment on iTunes helps us out, or on our website, comedyhistory101.com. Also, a few quick plugs. On Friday, July 26th, 7 p.m. at the Red Room, I'll be presenting my show Tale, NYC's finest storytelling. No hokey gimmicks, no dime themes. Tale brings you the best in New York storytelling. Also, on August 4th, 8:30 at the People's Improv Theater, I'll be presenting my show AI versus Human Roast Battle. Come out and see a machine learning AI take on a human rapper in a roast battle of tomorrow. And you can find out all about these show dates on my website, harmonleon.com, or on the social medias at harmonleon. And now, without further ado,
you're stupid. Everybody's so stupid.
I'm trying to use the phone. Excuse me.
Comedy History 101.
hey man, so let's jump right in. Tell me your comedy history. What led you to working for the Kimmel Show?
I was in high school and I was like really like everyone else, had tons of comedy albums and listened to Howard Stern.
What would be on the shelves of your comedy album shelf?
Oh my God. Jackie Mason comes to mind. He had an album called something to the lines of, I know it's from the mouth of a genius, me. And he had one line on the album where he says, I'm laughing now because I know what joke is coming up. You know, he was so funny. And of course, you know, Don Rickles and a lot of the old like Red Skeleton, those guys were like just really funny and inventive. And just a lot of, there was a used record store. My dad was a jazz collector, so we'd go to the Crazy Rhythms where they have all the new jazz records. And my brother and I, Mike Spiegelman, who you're friends with, so we know each other, went to his used record store next door, and there was all these old records from like the 50s and the 60s, the First Family, and just all this. So we would just buy random, you know, things of people performing. And then there'd be some old Bill Cosby records and Richard Pryor, but yeah, it was just a lot of random old comics. And that was kind of like, You got the freedom. Comedy records are so brilliant. You got the freedom to do what you want. You know, like their own specials.
Yeah,
Albert
I'm a big
Brooks.
fan of the Laugh record label, Laugh Records, which was kind of what are they called again? Party records.
Party records, because and everything they said
Skillet
was
and
brilliant.
Leroy and people like that. And they're like the recording of those records, like when the live setting, like Red Fox, you know, when he recorded, it's just like it's so low quality, but it just somehow just captures such energy in the room.
It was like it was like a tape recorder in the back of the room.
Yeah, something probably like that. But you can hear all the clanking of glasses, and but just people just like destroying rooms.
But because that's the point. You heard them destroying, you just assume these people are genius, and what's coming out on this record has got to be the funniest thing ever, because they wouldn't put it on the record. And all these people who are co-signing on the material, they wouldn't be dying laughing. So you're already like buying into this, that this is the most brilliant thing ever. But so it was a high school. I tried to get my brother to do stand-up because I still think he's the funniest person. He wouldn't do it. And so I did stand-up in high school 4 years. Every weekend I would go to this club in town. It was like a luncheonette that did comedy. And
this is in Jersey, or did you come into
Jersey.
Manhattan?
No. Well, I would go into Manhattan, but the club I was performing at was in New Jersey. And it was at 10 o'clock at night. I'd ride my bike there and perform there until midnight. And as I got older, I would try to hit on college girls and try to convince them that I was, of age. And
I'm a sophomore.
Yeah. I know, I'm an 18-year-old sophomore in high school.
Yeah.
And that's where I met Jay Moore. He lived in the town next door. We had an audition for a open call for a TV show, and I'd been doing it for a year. And he had never done it before, but I just think he's so talented. He just came off like he had done it for a while. So they put us together, and, we were friends for a long time. And so anyway, I did that for a while, went to college, and after college went to New York, and I wanted to produce, which I do now, but I wanted to do stand-up, and I saw that it was it made you unique. I worked at VH1. They're like, oh, well, this guy also does stand-up. And I thought, well, anyone could do stand-up. I did.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but they were impressed by it. So I did a lot of stand-up, did a lot of characters at Surf Reality and all those kind of downtown places.
Legendary.
Legendary. But it was a weird dichotomy. I hate the word dichotomy, but I would go downtown with all these crazy people and do these crazy characters or do stand-up at clubs. And then I would go to my day job, which was like Inside Edition, where I'd book victims' families and crazy stories, or I do daytime TV where I get like I'm in love with my stepsister. And
was it Bill O'Reilly Inside Edition era?
No, it was right after that. It's the same woman who's been doing it now for 30 years. But yeah, that was a really, really taxing job, and anyone who does that, my hat off to you, because you're talking to these people like, I don't want to get into it, but it's heavy. It's heavy work. But yeah, so I did a lot of daytime talk shows for a while doing stand-up on the side. So, but that led me to Kimmel. Was when I tried to get out of those shows, they would kind of pigeonhole me, and I couldn't do celebrity or whatever. No one would consider I did comedy. So I got into Kimmel as a human interest producer, since I dealt with real people, and I booked, the guy who ate 10,000 Big Macs, who is now up to 50,000. There's a lot of weird people, Lucha Vavoom, or crazy kaiju wrestling, people dressed up like Godzilla wrestling each other.
I covered those guys. I love
great,
that.
Right?
Yeah, Kaiju Big Battle.
That Kaiju Big Battle, yes.
Yeah.
They were awesome.
I photographed them. It was like, I love their show.
Oh, so it looks so good. Yeah. So we had a beer pong, and it was like, this is 2000, and none of us had played beer pong in college. So this was very new to us. And so Legal had to get involved, because they were drinking beer. And then they posted like, oh, we're on this dumb show, Jimmy Kimmel Live. Check us out. They're being like teenage college kids. And then my EP was like, oh, screw these guys. We're working so hard to get them on TV. And so we just canceled them.
Were you there like right from the start of Jimmy Kimmel Live?
From the start. Yeah. So the human interest was like really important, that because we couldn't get a lot of celebrities. So we had to get a lot of interesting things to replace it. And then one thing I did, which I got to book a lot. I just thought, well, who would I want to see on the show? So this is a long time ago. So we had Buzz Aldrin on, Stan Lee, Yoko Ono, like just interesting people too. Then that was kind of fun to have that freedom. And we definitely had time to book whatever we thought of.
And what were those early days like? Was it kind of shaky start, or was it pretty, solidified right out of the gate? And again, it was like that came up was the era, it was a limited amount of late night talk shows where now there's a zillion.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was that was starting to push the bubble a little more. So there was Leno, Letterman, and then at 11:30 we were at midnight, and then at 12:30 was Conan and Kilborn, and then the other guy, the other Craig, and
Kinnear.
Not Craig Kinnear,
Oh,
the
right.
Irish guy, the Scottish guy,
Oh, Ferguson.
So
Yeah.
and it was a pecking order, which is interesting. So we're in the new show, we're at the bottom of the pecking order. You know, you do Letterman. If you're in New York, you do Letterman, then you do Conan. If you're in LA, you do Leno, Ferguson, or not Ferguson, but the Kilborn, and then us. But as soon as Kilborn left and Ferguson came in, all of a sudden we're like, no, we're before Ferguson, to book celebrities. So we couldn't, no. So the answer is no. So the show's been on for 30 years, it's a huge success. But in the beginning, there's no way you can say the show's a success. It was very shaky grounds. To answer your question, we couldn't get anyone. We're booking people to the last second. Great story, Halloween. We couldn't find anyone. Adam Carolla was on all the time, obviously, but he's also great, but it was on all the time. So it was a Halloween show with Adam Carolla, I think. And then the last minute, my boss had Tammy Faye Baker's number on his phone from booking her. And he's like, call Tammy Faye Baker, tell her she's coming on the show tonight, she'll do it. So I called Tammy Faye Baker. If you don't know who it is, you look her up now. And then I said, and he said, find out what she wants to dress up as. So I did this interview. Obviously, she's great. And then I said, what do you want to dress up as? And she goes, I'm Tammy Faye Baker.
Yeah.
Like she has tattooed makeup on her face.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's a walking Halloween costume. Like, what a ridiculous question. Yeah, so that was a lot of fun. We couldn't book anyone. No one would do our show. It was crazy. I think Jimmy would admit too. He was new. We were new. Things weren't working very well. So no, in the beginning it was very shaky. In terms of comedy, comics would come on and they wouldn't do well. I just don't know what was going on with the audience or the way we had them staged. I just don't think they figured it out yet. It just wasn't working. So quickly got a reputation for a place where you're not going to do well.
You're stupid. Everybody's so stupid.
But,
could you give us some early stories of, and it's going out live, how do you handle, or the staff handle, a comedian like eating it on live TV?
Yeah, I think if they're eating, you kind of feel bad, but I think, and also it just looks really bad and you're like, oh, this isn't great. But I've had comics that I booked when I was booking it and we weren't live that they ate it and it was, you just see your life in front of your face. There was a comic that I kind of want to out, but I just don't remember his name. We found, Brian found him and he was hilarious and we booked him and this is his big break. And I guess he was so nervous that he kept drinking before the show. And he was kind of like a weird kind of comic, which, we love. And he got drunk by the end because we had an open bar in the green room. So
I've been to the open bar, like I've been there a few times.
And I saw him and I was like, to the bartender, don't serve him. He's like, well, he wants a drink, which is kind of obnoxious. And then I was like, well, you're good, right? You're not going to drink him. No, I'm good. No. And he just fucking ate. He was so bad that we couldn't book any other comic with his cadence because it reminded my boss of the guy who just ate it so bad and took up our time on TV. Or there was another time where we were going to bump a comic because his set was bad, but the other guests, one left, one got sick. Like everything went wrong because we thought, oh, we'll just go along on the show and then not use the comic. But everything had gotten so bad during the show that we had to use the comic. And so that turned out to be just by default the best part of the hour, just because things were going wrong, during the show. Yeah, you just kind of sweat and you don't know what you're doing at that point. When you're bombing, now you're bombing on TV and everyone's kind of staring at you.
And then when did it start getting its legs? Like, do you remember like an iconic performance that changed it? You mentioned that Rodney Dangerfield had his last appearance on the show.
Well, yeah. So I'll get to Neil Hamburger, who changed everything. But Rodney Dangerfield was booked on the show, and obviously we love him. I did the pre-interview with him. I have it on tape somewhere, just because I thought it'd be funny to hear what it sounded like. Because my voice is like his voice, and he had no idea what I was saying. He was booked because he was about to get heart surgery, and his wife, who's a really wonderful woman, wanted him to do as much TV as possible, and because that's really where he was happy. So his manager sent me a list of setups that we had to do exact, and he would do his bit. And Jimmy didn't like to do setups because he felt like it was phony. And some comics appreciated it, some comics wanted the setup, you know. So Jimmy's like, I'm not going to do the setup. So I wrote a question, and I said to Rodney, when we ask this question about, I don't know, what do you like sweets, or how's your sleep at night? You go to the story about eating cake in the middle of the night and there's ants on it. And he's like, oh, okay. He's out of it. He's like, yeah. Okay. Gotcha. It was really cool. His wife was like, he can't walk out. He's too old, but he's Rodney Dangerfield. You have to have beautiful women around him. He has a reputation. So we got him in a golf cart with 2 women from the Man Show, drove him in, walked him and sat down. And then Jimmy says, hey, and Jimmy's like, I'm not doing the setup. I'm just going to, and I saw him on Kilborn 2 nights before, and he did the same exact act, and Kilborn read everything. So Jimmy's like, how's the dieting going? Do you like sweets? And Dangerfield's staring in space. Finally, Jimmy says, because I was like, his wife said we have to say cakes and pies. So finally, Jimmy just says cakes and pies, and Rodney's like, "Oh, hey, how are you? Let me just tell you, the other night,
oh wow!" So it just like knocked him back to
yeah, like those words, like, you know, the setup like triggered him, and he did this great bit perfectly, and then went back down. And then Jimmy was like, "All right," he gave him the setups that he needed just because that's where he was at.
I've heard those stories like on Dana Gould's podcast where he talks about like Dana Gould worked with like Bob Hope like on his last TV special. And he was like this little withered man. But then when it came time for showtime, he just like something just like triggered him and he just like lit up and given that burst of adrenaline.
Yeah, I remember seeing Martin Lawrence. I've interviewed him a few times recently, but back in the day, Jimmy wasn't doing the setups. So he was just kind of like, oh, and then he got to it. And then afterwards he said to his guys, like, that was great, but it was a workout. And I think the idea is that for audiences, it doesn't feel like this is phony. This does feel like Carson, you know, that he just says, how you doing? And then they do a great bit.
Yeah.
You know, I think he was trying to go back to that. And and people like Martin at that moment was like able to make that work.
I'm trying to use the phone.
You went from people interest to comedian producer. And how did you make that transition?
He kind of got dumped on me. The guy who was booking it was very busy doing other things. So I was just like, oh, I know it. I'll do it. So I just kept doing it, producing it. Eventually, I got the part. But the guy was like, oh, just do this. So then I would go out. There was another comic, I'll tell you a story. He's a famous comic. I'm not going to say who it is. But his set was so bad and I didn't know what to do. And I was like, oh, this set's really not funny. And I finally showed it to my boss. And he's like, well, we got to cancel him. And I was like, oh, shit. You know. He's like, we'll just cancel him. We're not going to put him on. We'll find something. He's like, I'd rather put on something else. So that was my first experience of that. And
did you have to call him up and cancel him? And you're literally canceling him, not like cancel today.
Yeah, literally cancel. Yeah, I don't know if it was him or his people, but he wasn't happy. He kind of knew what was going on. But right. I think that's on you. You know, I don't know what to tell you. You can come back and say, I can give you something better, or you can just be mad about it. We had a lot of great people the first time. Russell Peters' first time in America. He was amazing. Again, I didn't book him. The producer just wasn't there, so I ended up producing him. Months later, he came back to the show to hang out, and he gave me a hug, and I was like, "Who are you?" Yeah. He's like, "I'm Russell Peters. You just produced me." I was like, "Oh yeah." And
when you say just produced, could you just like walk us through that process?
Well, sure. Well, there's, you know, either I find them and book them, or a booker does, or, you know, the comedian. So do
you go out like scouting the clubs and that sort of thing, or is it just like working through like their management or agents? Or
I think a lot of it is through management and agents. So you have a manager. But I think when I started doing it full time for like Lopez, I set up showcases, and, you know, like when we started at Kimmel, we were like, oh, can we get some tapes from like Stand Up New York? So they send us like, you know, this tapes, like 3 VHS tapes packed with comedians. Like, no, give us like 3 people you think are superstars. Yeah. Don't give me every person that has a bringer show. So yeah, going out to clubs, and I thought I was going to be like this rebel, and I drove out to the middle of nowhere just to some kind of hip comedy night. And I immediately saw why people do go to the Laugh Factory, Improv, These guys were good, but they weren't great yet. And there I saw a couple guys and I tracked them, and like Patrick Keane is really great now. And I just saw that like that guy was going to be great. So you do go to clubs as much as you can. The woman whose name escapes me booked at Arsenio Hall and found a lot of great people for the original show and the new show. She would go to clubs every night, and she enjoyed it. She'd watch it, and she booked a lot of people that kind of upper and comers that became kind of famous later. Famously, she booked George Lopez on Arsenio Hall because she saw him at a club. And there's clubs, there's tapes. Kevin Shea, your buddy?
Yeah, San Francisco guy.
Yeah, so I did this Gong Show segment when I was a human interest producer called Future Talent Showcase, where we just have like people that are so bad they're good, but they're like endearing in a way. So I had to advertise for tapes and submissions, but without letting them know it was kind of like a Gong Show thing. So Kevin submitted for that, not knowing, and he was so good that I passed it along to our booker, who wound up became David Rath, who became his manager.
Oh, right. Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So it can happen if you send in a tape or obviously a link, and if it's good. But yeah, going to clubs, mostly managers, though. I think that's a really big step. I mean, it's the lazy way to do it, but you trust the manager, you know, to send you a tape and it's handed to you.
Now, I think this is setting you up for something you sent me, but who was the favorite comedian that you booked on the show? And I'm throwing this out to you. His last name is a food item.
Yes, Billy Hot Dog. I love Billy Hot Dog.
Yeah.
No, Neil Hamburger.
Yeah.
So again, you know, the show is struggling. We're trying to get attention and at least book spots. I mean, that was my job, and it was so hard in the beginning. Now, obviously, it's not. But my boss said, I want you to book something so unique, so crazy that I'm going to think you're crazy, and that I could even fire you, that this is such a bad idea. And, you know, I want you to take it. So I was like, got it. So my brother Mike found this CD because this rock label, independent rock label, put out Neil Hamburger's comedy CDs because he used to open up for rock bands.
Because he worked with, who was it? Mr. I forgot the name of the band he worked with, but they were an offshoot of a bigger band. And he was like the tour manager for them, wasn't he?
Yeah,
and then he would be put into the opening act and just do anti-comedy. I think.
Yeah, he would do that. And then he would also, they did prank calls, like really bad prank calls where it's like the kind of making fun of prank calls.
Yeah, Greg Turkelson, isn't that his real name?
Yeah, oh, he's great.
Yeah.
So he would call up and he would be like, have you booked Neil Hamburger? And they're like, who are you? What's going on? You know? So Mike bought that album and then bought his first stand-up album, which isn't him really doing stand-up. It's him in a studio pretending to stand up.
Yeah, but with sound effects. I think I got that one. Yeah.
Oh my God, his later album is so great. It's like a live album, quote unquote. And the microphone is near these audience members. And while he's doing his act on stage, you hear go, what's that? Is that a microphone? Oh yeah. This guy sucks. He's terrible. Help us. But his whole act is that he's really terrible and offensive and awful. It's just so funny. So I pitch him, and I think my boss is like, I don't get it, or I get it. Let's see. He shows it to Jimmy, and Jimmy's like, this is great. So we all assume he's going to bomb. And it's hard to, real stand-ups aren't doing well. So I looked him up. He has like a geo site, website.
A geo site.
And he recalls me like a couple days later from Australia. He's touring with a band. He's opening up for some band. And he's like, yeah, I'll come back, you know? So he said, I said, send me your set. Don't censor your set. Send me whatever you have. And then I'll give it to the censors and we'll let them tell us, don't censor yourself. Just give me what you think is your best 5 minutes, and then we'll go from there. So he said, and it was totally like, it was a joke about Michael Jackson's sperm on a plate, you know, like really like crazy shit. And everything went through. Every crazy Neil Hamburger thing went through. So that was great. And then we just assume the audience is going to hate him, so we're going to get reaction shots.
Our next guest has been wowing audience since 19-something. His new CD is called Laugh Out Lord. Please welcome America's funny man, Neil Hamburger.
And oddly enough, the guy who played Hunter, Fred Dreyer, was friends with Cleto from the band, from Drinking Buddies, so he was in the audience. So, like, we were going to get a picture of Fred Dreyer randomly, the star of a show from the 90s, you know, in the audience. So it was all set up for it. Oh, and the other guest that night was Yoko Ono, which was an awesome get, and Poppy Montgomery. And I remember I was working in the booking department, so my boss in the booking department comes to me and says, this Neil Hamburger, you better not mess this up. I have Poppy Montgomery here tonight. And if you embarrass me in front of Poppy Montgomery, we might not get anyone. She was like the 8th lead on a cop show. And I was like, oh, okay, Poppy Montgomery, we'll be fine. So before he starts, they just whisper to Yoko Ono, which is goes with your shirt. This guy is a really good performance artist. So she just lit up. That's like her world.
Yeah.
He goes out there, and half the audience hates him, half the audience gets it. Our audience loved him like he was a real comic. So when we were cutting to people in the audience, they were laughing for real. Fred Dreyer would look confused, but everyone else was kind of having a great time.
Hello, my name is Neil Hamburger. Why did the farmer start a punk rock band? Because he was tired of hauling oats.
He was so great. He did such a great job. And then that actually helped him, get he had another CDs and other stuff come out. But that was just an amazing moment. So I think from that moment on, the comics did well. I don't know why. I just needed to break that kind of curse or something.
Yeah, I remember seeing him in San Francisco, like some small room on off of Polk Street, the back room. But he has like good jokes. They're solid. It's not all anti-comedy. It's like his jokes are, they're good.
Well, they're like, what does my ex-wife do with half my money while she lives in the 51st state or something? And I don't know, Alaska. Oh, right. Well, that's reaction. And he's like, oh, that's my life. Oh, and he holds like a glass of liquor and he spills it. So he was like, let me get like 2 more glasses to put in my arm. So while he was doing it, he accidentally spilled a little bit. And then he realized that was funny. Like you could just see in his eyes. So he just kept spilling more. And he had more glasses. And now he performs with 30 glasses under his arm and just spilling.
Did you have any other like Neil Hamburger-esque comics on that kind of toted the line?
Yeah, we had some. Well, Eddie Pepitone was on a bunch, and he was always great. Well, I'll just say the one time which I just kind of was a good lesson. Eddie is a genius, and so he was doing this bit that you've probably seen, where he it's like the ransom bit. He admits he's not really a comedian. He lost his kid. He can't afford to go on local news like Mel Gibson in the movie Ransom. So he's going around the comedy clubs around the thing looking for his son. So we were going to do that bit. And it was a live show. And at that moment, they needed to take a minute off of his bit. He's been doing that bit for like 10 years, let's say, exactly the way he does it. So the EP comes up to him minutes before and says, you got to cut a minute. And he says it like that. You got to cut a minute out of this or you're dead or I'm going to kill you or whatever it was. He was like, you got to do it. So Eddie was like in his head trying to change something on air, live TV. So the brilliant bit didn't go as well. I'll tell you that same time, another time, the first time we ever had Eddie on, it was a last minute booking. I was like, you got to have him on. He's brilliant. He's going to do this brilliant bit. So he does rehearsal and it's really just for blocking. And he really could just stand there, but I wanted him to run it, and there's another lesson I learned. He does it, and people aren't laughing. Like the crew guys are working, everyone's doing stuff, and it's weird. He's yelling, that he does. So the stage manager goes to my boss and says, "This guy was terrible. He bombed. You can't have him on TV. He's terrible." So I get called in the office, and finally I'm like, "He's wrong. He's wrong. I'm right. He's wrong." Just trust me. This guy's a genius. You're going to be lucky we have him. And he goes, okay. Finally, he's like, if he does bad, you take all the blame. I was like, that's fine. Because I was like 99% sure, unless we have a stupid thing like that. I was like, all right. But if he does great, you got to give me a little credit. It's like, yeah. So, yeah, I totally went to bat for Eddie. I was 100% right. And afterwards, my boss looked at me and goes, oh, the stage manager's an idiot. Who is he? So that was a lesson where I learned like appearances always have to be good. So when they're doing the rehearsal, they're going through the segment. I would bring down interns and I would have them sit in the front row and I'd be like, you have to laugh. This is the funniest thing you've ever seen. And you're welcome. You get to watch, whoever, Greg Fitzsimmons or somebody doing stand up just for you.
Yeah.
So enjoy yourself. And then the crew guys, I would say, I know you're working, but laugh for this guy. You're the only people here for this rehearsal.
Yeah.
So that makes it much better. The rehearsal is important. I remember when I got to Lopez, the director was like, I don't need to rehearse comedians. I'm just going to book them. I'll start here, like for the top part up. And then so they had two cameras. One was doing the torso to the head, and the other one was doing the full body. And he would like switch from each to each, back and forth. And I was like, well, you don't even know where the punchlines are. So you're stepping on their punchline maybe by changing a camera because you don't know. I was like, no, you got to rehearse it. The woman from Arsenio, who booked a lot of great people, booked, gosh, damn it. Is a very funny Southern comedian, is a very popular podcast right now.
Tiffany Haddish.
Yes. Well,
because I'm reading. You told me. There's an email.
Yes. No. Theo Von was on.
Right. Okay. Right.
And obviously he killed. He was great, but he was a minute over. So I had to go in the editing room and now cut him down. And this woman's yelling, "Why would you cut the man's art?" I was like, "Well, because we were commerce. Because we're a show that has to be a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
And he shouldn't have done 6 minutes. He should have done 5 or 4.5, whatever." And I was like, when you looked at his act, what did you think? And she goes, I was going to tell him what to say. I was like, well, this is a TV show. You're not going to put anything on that we don't know about. This is our house. You know, right? You're not going to have a dinner party and it's like, bring whatever you want. And then the guy brings, some crap. So you have to go over the comedian set. One time a comedian changed his set on air because he thought it was better his way. And we were like, oh, this is terrible. So, yeah. It was so bad. We did cut him, and he did a dress rehearsal. His act wrong, and I just like, let me just talk to him. I was like, very nice. I should have yelled at him like the other guy, but I was like, you got to do the way we had it, just because I knew that you got to trust other people. I know that Lopez's audience is 500 people every day. I write for them. I produce for them. If you start with these jokes, they're gonna love it. If you go over here, they're gonna not know who you are. So he did it his way. And then that night I was like, you have to do it the way because that's the way it's written in the script. That's what the legal
blocking and all that. Yeah.
Everything. Yes. So he just did it his way and the audience was confused and he bombed. And we had to cut a minute from the actor because he was so boring. And we thought we'd give this comedian time at the end and to talk on panel, kind of like with Carson. But he was so bad that we left the boring actor in the front of the show. And just went to George dancing and saying goodnight at the end.
You mentioned a Jim Jeffries story. Did that take place the year I saw you in Edinburgh?
Yeah. So I was there just as a civilian, even though I was booking comedians in New York and in LA rather. And I was at, you and I went to a lot of parties and events and shows, and there's amazing comedians. I mean, it's probably the best week of my life. And the last night I went to a party at a castle for this agent was like, oh, I rented a castle. He's like very full of himself.
What agent was that?
Mike
Rizzo.
Of course.
He used to rep me. He knows.
You paid for that castle. It's you alone.
Yeah.
So he's a good guy, but he's very like, oh, I have a castle, So he has his castle party, and I've seen Jeff. They did a really cool thing called silent comedy. Instead of a silent disco, which is where you wear headphones and you can switch between two different DJs at a public party. It was two different comics, and he was one of them, and I thought he was very funny. It was a very weird experience, but he was there, and it was this girl just magging on him. Just loving everything he was putting down. And I wanted to talk to him, but he was just so involved in this girl. And I thought, that is a really cool guy. And I was like, so I went back and I tried to book him on Kimmel. And then I ended up booking him on Lopez Tonight. And it seemed out of the blue because he just came in from Australia for it. And that was his first night. And I had seen him at the silent comedian thing, but I knew there was something good about him. And there was so many great comics there that month. That we were there, including yourself. That show was a lot of fun.
Hey, I can't remember what show I was putting on there, but yeah. I don't know. I think back to Edinburgh. I just think of just being in complete anxiety mode 24/7.
You seem like it. I think I saw you towards the end, and you were just a lot. I think the complaint is that it becomes like a job where you're clocking in, you're doing your show, and then you go out, and then you clock in.
Well, it's just taking the specialness of what makes you special in your your craft art, whatever you want to call it, and then put you alongside 3,000 other people in the same situation. So, comparison's the thief of joy. I'll just put it that way.
It's hard to compete when you're competing with the best in the world. I mean, yeah, the best English-speaking people in the world.
And what happened with Augie Smith?
Augie Smith is the best. So it's Lopez tonight. So where do you find comedians? I went to the Portland Comedy Festival that Andy and him started to see comics. There's a lot of great people there. It was Jesse Lopez was great, and Augie was great. So I wanted to book Augie, and I was a little nervous because he's so new or not known. He was a touring comic. So we kind of put it up. We finally booked him, and his manager, Augie doesn't know this part, was so bad and so annoying that he kept trying to get stuff for himself that I was like, well, then I don't know. I didn't offer to fly Augie out because I was just like, well, if this guy doesn't know to ask, I'll save myself $600 or something. So Augie booked his own flight and he's got to stop over somewhere. So he's like, I'm going to do that. He does this stuff. He's a very funny comedian. He does a stopover. He's like, you know what? I got to believe in myself. I am on Lopez. I am a good comic. I'm going to text all the club owners that I'm going to be on Lopez tonight. So he does that, gets on the plane. While he's on the second leg of the tour, we get called into a meeting that we're canceled.
Oh,
Lopez, yeah, we are canceled. So we have 2 shows left, and we're all scrambling to figure out what we're going to do. And he lands, and I'm like, I got bad news, we're canceled. And then he's like, well, what about his last night, George is going to premiere a new comic and he's really trying to get on. And now I just finally said, I lost my job. Yeah. I'm not going to sit here and argue with you. You're welcome to come and hang out. I'm very sorry. And you can meet George.
Yeah.
So our last show, we had on all these friends of George, famous friends of George on. Arsenio was there. And so he didn't get to perform, but it was just only because we were canceled. Oh. But in hindsight, it would have been kind of cool to be like, I don't know, here's some white guy. And he comes up. But I've always tried to book him on different things. He's great. Remember that joke he has about they locked up the condoms at the pharmacy? And he said, why did you lock them up? And they go, well, we don't want people to steal condoms. He goes, that's the people I want to have condoms, are people who would steal condoms. I butchered it. But Ron Funches I saw there, and I knew his manager well. She was a friend of mine. I kind of dragged my feet on Ron, and then he went to Conan, and I was like, it's too late. So I lost him on Conan, but he had a great set. He wound up doing it on Conan, and obviously he's a great comic. Gerard Carmichael, people were like, you got to book this guy. So I called him, and he's like, real cool. It's like, yeah, man, come out. So I went to the Laugh Factory. He said, come to the Laugh Factory and see me, man. So he comes in, we shake hands. He's like, hey, have a seat. And then he gets on stage and he goes, hey, anyone have any questions for me? I'm like, I'm doing this. Yeah. And people are throwing him stuff, and obviously he's hilarious. And I don't know if it's pre-planned or bits or whatever, but he was great. And then a little while later, I knew his manager, and she's like, I don't know how to say this, but he wants to go on Letterman as his first ever appearance. And I was like, all right. Yeah, he was a brilliant comic that I just knew that this guy was going to be huge. You can just tell that some people are going to be great. Yeah.
And just a couple of last questions, because I'm on the free plan of Zoom. I always like keeping it concise.
No, yeah, I wear out my welcome after a while.
So, yeah. Okay, so just a few last questions here. What would you say are like the 5 things you most learned from your time at Kimmel?
In terms of like, if you're a comic, like what to do to get booked?
No, just as a producer, you personally and your comedy evolution.
Yeah, I've learned that you got to know your audience, whether it's the audience at home or in some cases it's your host. Like if the host finds it funny, then it'll get on air, and nine times out of 10, the audience will find it funny. So you kind of like, that's who you're writing for. And this is why sometimes you're like, well, why if you watch Fallon, they're like, well, that seems silly. Well, that's what Jimmy likes, and that's what his audience likes. There's that. Definitely, you can tell someone's good just by talking to them, and then you can work around it. So if there's comics that got a great personality, like Gerard Carmichael, let's say he didn't have any material. He went up with no material, and he still was amazing. So there are people like that. And then there's people that no matter what won't be good, or, can be great. And you got to give them time. And that too, The guy who hosted the Daily Show that got fired for lying or didn't get to host the Daily Show.
Who's that?
The guy who had this show Patriot Act on Netflix, Hassan.
Hassan Minaj.
Yeah, so the accountant at Lopez was friends with him and was like, you got to book my friend Hassan. He's great. He's great. He's great. And I was like watching him. I was like, you are great, but you're not ready. So I think
he's a not San Francisco guy. He's like from Sacramento guy that I think during my last years was when he started. So he's like his comedy history is Bay Area comedy.
Yeah, he's great. Like he was always great, but it's like you're not ready yet, you know. So both things can be true at the same time. You have to like trust your instinct. Yeah, one time I was trying to book this real amazing dancer. He does like weird stuff. You've seen him online. And I tried to book him and his manager was like, oh, I can't reach him. Why don't you book these guys? I can't reach him. And the pressure's on me to get this guy on air. And finally, just something clicked in my head. I was like, does he even know him? Which I didn't want to believe because it's such a fucked up thing. And I was like, do you really represent this guy? And then I don't hear back. And then I get an email saying, here's his home address. And it turned out he had fired him 5 years ago. And this guy was just trying to book other people. So trust your gut is another thing. And when you talk to a celebrity, just if you know, obviously from hearing me, I'm very monotone, a very low key person. But you know me well, so you know that I'm excited to see you or whatever. That's got to go. You have to have a lot of energy. You have to be laughing. You have to love everything over the top and not in a condescending way. But these people are performers. They're going to go on TV. You know, you have to show them that you got to give them a little juice. So that was kind of a thing I learned, that you have to laugh. You can't just be like, yeah, that's cool. It can't be cool. You got to be really happy to see them and everything's got to be great. And which is fine, which just makes sense. You know, I say that in an all positive way. What else I learned? Yeah, you can find to watch every tape like Kevin Shea, watch every link, look at everything. You never know. And then you got to cut people off too.
And funny side story. I remember one time I came down and Barry Manilow was on, and you put me in the front row of when Barry Manilow performed. Like it was in that side front entrance bit. He did his concert thing, and I was dating this Irish woman who came over from Ireland. And that night we were just randomly watching TV, and I didn't know like there was a cutaway to me. It was like, oh yeah, I just happened to.
Well, it was a good reaction.
No, I wasn't expecting a cutaway to me. But
you're in the front row on a TV show.
No, I know, but it was just like it's like, you know, it made me look good to go. Yeah. I sometimes cutaways on big shows.
Yeah, they got
yeah.
Oh, well, I hope it helped.
Yeah. Was there any weirdness in like in the green room thing? Because I think I heard maybe you telling me there's these like people that would sometimes just come down every night just for the free drinks.
Oh, well, there was definitely that, and they had to like curve that. I think the craziest night was Andy Dick.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good story. Yeah. So he was normal. He's a genius, and you know he's got substance abuse problems, and or allegedly. But we're in his dressing room, and he's normal, and he's great, and he's on it. And I'm talking to him, and as I'm talking to him, his assistants are giving him more and more vodka, and he's getting more and more messed up. So allegedly. So anyway, we were on stage, and he just seemed like he was 100% drunk, and he's acting drunk. He's doing crazy things, and we're trying to get him off stage, and he won't go. He won't leave. And Jimmy's like, will you behave for the next guest, who was Ivanka Trump? And yeah, he's like, I'll behave. So this is all on TV. So Jimmy's like, he'll be fine. You know, I trust him. So he's sitting next to her. She's doing her thing, and she has a ponytail. And
what was her thing back in the 2000s?
I guess it was the Apprentice.
Oh, okay, right.
Or just being famous. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Or that her dad was on The Apprentice. I think she was on The Apprentice at that point. But yeah, we weren't getting at that time. We weren't getting the president's daughter. We were getting Ivanka Trump.
Yeah. If he did get Trump, you'd be washed up. Whatever he is then.
Then, yeah. No, we couldn't book Trump then. He was on the hit show Apprentice.
Right, yeah.
And then I think beforehand, we definitely could have booked him. So she was on, and he just kept like flirting with her, and it was awkward. It was funny, but awkward for her. And then he pulled her ponytail, And Jimmy's like, you got to go. This poor woman's on TV. You got to go. So the whole time we're looking at security and they're not doing anything. And then when Jimmy's like, you got to go. And he's like touching our other guest, myself, Uncle Frank, who's amazing. And then like 2 other staff members, we came up and maybe another security guard. I don't think so. We picked him up. Like everyone had like an arm or a leg and physically pulled him off stage. We took him all the way down to the green room, like down those steps. And the door of the green room, security was like, you got this, right? And I was like, no, I don't got this. So I'm walking him down the hallway to his dressing room, and he's saying like the most offensive, crazy shit to me. And on stage,
was he pissed off or?
No, he was just no. He was not pissed off. He was just saying crazy stuff, and I was like, yeah, it's great. And I'm like pushing him down the hallway to his people, and they're like, well, what are we gonna do? I was like, I don't know, but you have to leave. And that was it.
Did that become like a TMZ thing or anything like that?
I think it was maybe pre-TMZ. It became a big deal, and then we had him back on, and Jimmy had him dressed up like Hannibal Lecter and rolled him out, and with his face covered and everything. Yeah, I had some fun times with Andy Dick. It was, we'd go. I'd see him somewhere, and he would take me around, and he was a really nice guy. But we had other things. But the photo was up for a while of him with Ivanka. Yeah, it was a crazy night. Another time, I just remember Slash was there, and he was playing Rochambeau. We had the Rochambeau expert champion woman. It was from San Francisco, actually. And they were sitting there after hours, and he wasn't drinking, but after hours, the 2 of them were playing Rochambeau, and I thought, wow, this is my rock star moment. I'm hanging out with Slash, playing Rochambeau, like not getting screwed up. He was a nice guy too. Yeah, I don't know any other. I'm sure there was crazy stories, but nothing really broke or anything. People were pretty civil there.
In summary, what do you think Jimmy Kimmel Live placed in comedy history?
Well, I think he introduced a lot of like more unique comics that you wouldn't have on, and like in terms of music, he brought a lot of hip hop and stuff that he was the first person to have 50 Cent on. So I think in the beginning was because we had to take chances because we had nothing else, and also Jimmy really has an appreciation for comedy and for weird people. He kind of loves it. So I think that was kind of like the only place in TV where you would see that from a guy who appreciates it. Like he's not condescending to the weirdo. He loves talking to that person. So I think there's that. And then he brought 112 appearances of Todd Glass to America. That guy was constantly on. Eddie Pepitone. Yeah, I think in terms of stand-ups, it was a hard road to get stand-ups to work on a show, and eventually made it work. But late night is not really like the thing, right? Is podcasting probably helps more than anything, but this times have changed.
Again, what do you think big changes in comedy and late night television from then to now?
Well, from then, like we were saying, there was like 3 choices of late night, and before that there was 2, and before that there was only 1. So to get on a show, like even when we weren't popular, they were watching to see what we had. Leno was stealing stuff tried to steal it from me. They called me up not knowing I worked for Kimmel, being like, can we take you should put this act on our show. And I was like, well, no, I have a deal. I just lied and said I have a deal with Kimmel. And they're like, well, you shouldn't do that. They steal from each other. So they see Eddie kill or Todd or somebody, then Dane Cook was on our show, and that was an amazing appearance. And then 2 days later, he's on Leno, and they called him up and said, can you do what you did on Kimmel? I mean, so I think even if the show is not hugely popular, they're going to steal from you and assume that no one saw it. So I think he introduced the world to he took big swings, definitely.
Yeah. Are you still in contact with him?
No, I mean, I could, not really. No, not really. I think not my choice. I'm sure it'll be cordial, but I saw him a couple times after I left, but they did have a big 20th anniversary party, but I didn't go.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would have been fun to see everybody.
Yeah, and I guess lastly, where can people find you? Anything you'd like to plug, and what are you currently working on now? Which I know because I looked at your IMDb page. But
I wonder what it says. I work at Access Hollywood. We have a daytime talk show called Access Daily. So I produce celebrities and comedy segments for video comedy, and then I actually do a comedy news segment, the Daily Funny. We do show clips of comics along with doing comedy news. So if you have clips that could air, just like on looks good, has good sound. That's always very important. And it's clean. Send it to me. My Instagram is King Spiegs, Spiegs, and then email me at reachadam@mac.com. And what was the other question? How to reach me, where I'm at there. Oh, that's great. Oh, yeah, you can listen to my old podcast, Proudly Resents. We do, were you on that?
I wasn't, but thank you for not having me.
I meant to call you. I left you a message. I left you a message. There are a lot of great, everyone but you from San Francisco, Bucky Sinister, Mike, and no, but it Proudly Resents is a bad movie podcast. A lot of comedians come on and rag on bad movies and interviews.
Oh,
and then I just did a podcast with Adam Felber and Andre Dubuchet called Stark Raving Reviews.
Yes. By the way, I just right before this message, Susie Felber, who's on my Tale show, my storytelling show this Friday, and she was very pleased that I was going to be talking to you.
Yeah, she's the best. I love her. Yeah, so check out Stark Raving Reviews. It's like 6 episodes are short. They're hilarious. Andre and Adam wrote them, so they're really funny.
What's the premise of that? Is it's scripted or?
It's scripted. They are the 2 worst movie reviewers, and they come on my movie show, and every week they promise that they're going to watch the movie, and they're not just going to give it a fake great review. And every week they let me down and piss me off. Yeah, we stopped doing it because it's the same joke, but it's a great joke.
Yeah.
So those episodes are really funny, and then we respect your time and stop at some point.
Very cool. Adam, great talking to you. Thanks so much. I love the stories, and also glad we got a chance to reconnect.
Yeah, it's good to hear from you. We should catch up.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on.
Okay, man.
All right.
Take care.
Right. I love to talk about myself.
Bye. Okay, bye.
And that wraps up today's episode of Comedy History 101. You got schooled in comedy. Once again, like, subscribe, comment, give us a star on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Every little bit helps Comedy History 101. Also, let's go through this quick. A few quick plugs. Friday, July 26th, 7 p.m. at the Red Room. Tale, NYC's finest storytelling. No hokey gimmicks, no dumb themes. Tale brings you the best in New York storytelling. Also, August 4th, 8:30 at the People's Improv Theater, AI versus Human Roast Battle. Come out and see a machine learning AI take on a human rapper in a roast battle of tomorrow. And you can find out all about the show dates at Harmon Leon on the social medias, harmonleon.com, and also more about our podcast, comedyhistory101.com. And until next time, bye-bye.
You're stupid. Everybody's so stupid.
I'm trying to use the phone!
Comedy History 101.